Hey guys, Tyler here, and I'm super excited today to have on the call with me Yuri. How's it going, Yuri?
I'm doing great, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks so much for taking the time today to get on the call. And I was gonna say your last name, but I keep messing up last name. So would you tell me what it is?
I'll give you the easiest way to say it is Elkaim.
Elkaim. What's the real way to say it?
Well, that's actually the way I say it, but I think the pronunciation. My dad's Moroccan, so I guess it would be like Elkaim.
Elkaim. Okay, yeah,
But
okay, yeah.
I never use that.
Okay, Elkaim is a bit easier. I
Yeah.
gotcha. So Yuri, for people who are on the call, they don't know who Yuri is. They're just jumping on this podcast, trying to listen about cleansing, how to cleanse their body for the new year, and so on and so forth. Who are you? How did you get to where you are? And what are you hoping to teach people? Give us that 50,000-mile view.
Yeah, so just a quick rundown of the first 24 years of my life. My entire mission was to play pro soccer. So when I was growing up, I was very, very active, training all the time, playing all the time. So I was very fit. But when I was 17, after a number of years of low energy and eczema and asthma and all sorts of other problems, I ended up starting to lose my hair. So I didn't really know why that was happening. So I was very fit, but I wasn't healthy. And I didn't realize what was happening to my body. So I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called alopecia. And for about 8 years, the medical community had no solutions. It was basically like, we can inject some cortisone at your head, and
Right.
that's all we can do. So that wasn't a satisfying answer for me. So I wanted to figure out more about my health, and I was really interested in studying conditioning and performance and stuff like that. So I studied kinesiology at the University of Toronto, but I was still clueless with respect to nutrition. So after I graduated, I played pro soccer for 3 years. It was an awesome time. I decided that it wasn't something I wanted to pursue any further because I had an epiphany that there was something else I needed to do on this planet, which is what I'm doing now. So anyways, I came back to Toronto, pursued studies in holistic nutrition, and the first day of class, I remember asking one of my professors, I said, do you think that my hair loss is in any way related to my diets or a lot of the kind of the toxic junk that's built up, that's been built up in my body? Because for most of my life, I was eating breads, pasta, cereals, a lot of processed foods, very few fruits and vegetables. And I was on medications like asthma, inhalers and cortisone cream and all that stuff. So it all builds up. And they're like, absolutely, we see it every single day. So I'm like, 8 years of questions and finally get an answer in a day.
Right.
So I was pretty excited. So within about 6 weeks, I was starting to learn about nutrition in a really holistic manner, cleaned up my diet, cleaned up my body, and I regrew my hair pretty much in about, I would say, about 2 months. And it was really phenomenal because I didn't actually really care too much about the hair. It was more about the energy and just the feeling of vitality that I started to experience. So for about 8 years, I had my hair, even though I kept my head shaved, just because it was my claim to fame. And then about a year, and as you can see right here, I actually don't have any eyebrows. And that's, for the reason for that is because about a year ago, I started noticing that my hair was falling out again, and I didn't know why that was happening. And I think out of shame, I actually covered it up for a while with makeup. I actually used my wife's makeup just to paint on my eyebrows, just because I've been this really kind of public figure in the health space. And I figured, well, if I look like I'm going through chemo, what would people think? So a little while ago, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to play this game anymore. I'm just going to take off my mask and just let people know that this is who I am. This is, where I'm at right now. And I don't know why it's why it's come back. Sometimes we don't necessarily know. It could be some stress with my little kids. Who knows?
Right.
But
I feel you, bro. I feel you.
yeah. But I mean, I feel awesome. I'm healthier than ever. At least I think I am. At least I feel that way. And it's just one of those things with an autoimmune condition that comes and goes, and it hasn't stopped me from wanting to reach out and help more people. So, anyways, to kind of condense all of the stuff that I'm doing now, we're on a mission to help 10 million people by 2018 improve their health and fitness. I've been doing this for the past 13 years. We've helped over probably close to 500,000, and it's been an amazing ride. And my real purpose on this planet was not to play pro soccer, but to use that, I guess, as a platform to eventually do what I'm doing right now, which is helping others improve their lives and their health and vitality. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome, man. That's a great story. I love it when I'm interviewing people and their success comes from their trials and tribulations, And I always love the saying, your character is forged in the fires of your adversities, because it's so true. Everybody I get on this call who's really passionate, who's really successful, has really had some serious adversities, and they've overcome them because they were stubborn, right? So you'll overcome whatever's coming your way. I'm interested in knowing from you, Yuri, what do you think are the things that people are doing right now that they should stop doing kind of immediately? Let's just kind of dig in, straightforward, shoot them with a bullet of truth. All right, let's go for it.
Yeah, I would say there are specific foods that I think a lot of them, I don't think have any kind of redeeming qualities. I'll talk specifically about two of them. Would be grains, glutinous grains specifically, and sugar. So I'm just going to lump those two together because they're almost the same thing.
Sure.
So with grains, I'm talking about wheat, rye, barley, most of the stuff that we have available to us. The problem there is that there's a couple things. I'll talk about one of them right now, which is called gluten, which is a protein that is very problematic for human health. It basically attacks our intestines as a survival mechanism to pass through us. And as a result, it's very, very problematic, even for people who don't have celiac, which is an autoimmune condition caused by gluten. Gluten is actually associated with 190 different autoimmune disorders, and it would definitely be at play in what I developed. So gluten, so if you're thinking about breads, pastas, cereals, again, this is the diet that I kind of survived on for 20 plus years,
Sure.
and most people are as well. I would strongly advise people to move away from that. Just from the gluten side alone, there's really no benefits to gluten at all. I mean, there's nothing.
Right.
The second issue with grains, again, these glutinous grains, is that they tend to have a higher glycemic index. So essentially what that does, the same thing with sugar here, so we can kind of clump them together, is that upon eating them, they're very quickly digested. And that's going to spike your blood sugar, which is going to lead to a spike in insulin, which is a hormone that takes sugar out of the blood and stores it in your muscles and fat cells. So unless you want to gain a lot of weight, you don't want a lot of insulin circulating in your blood all the time. Sure. And the problem now is that we've seen about almost 10% of the American population developing type 2 diabetes. And the sole cause of that is due to a lack of activity and a higher amount of these types of high glycemic foods in their diet, which means that they're having bagels, muffins, donuts, cereals, whatever it is, that are just constantly spiking their blood sugar, and they're having these elevated insulin levels as a result. And over time, your body says, you know what, I'm not going to respond to insulin anymore. I'm not going to basically, it's like getting cold called by, one of those cold calling companies every day. Eventually you stop answering the phone. That's what your cells essentially say to insulin. Because if insulin is constantly telling your cells, hey, we have sugar, we have sugar, we have sugar, you become resistant to that. And that's called insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes.
Right.
So the problem is that we've all been indoctrinated over the years by grain companies and all those lobbyists that whole grains are good for us because we need fiber. Well, the reality is that you could just simply eat more vegetables and fruit and you'll get plenty of fiber. It's been said that Paleolithic man had anywhere between 100 to 150 grams of fiber per day, which is ridiculous when you consider that this is way before the agricultural era. So they had no grains and all that stuff. So where are they getting their fiber from? Obviously from plant-based foods that had nothing to do with grains. Today, our average fiber intake is about 15 grams, in spite of all the grains that we eat. So the recommended intake is 35. So we're quite a ways off. So there really are no. I'm trying to think. I'm like, what are the redeeming qualities of bread or grains? I mean,
it's a fuel source to feed the masses, Yuri.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it, right? So when we start to think about this stuff and ask ourselves why, other than the fact that I need it for my sandwiches and all this, and we've all been brought up on it. It's just a matter of kind of turning the tables and looking for better alternatives because they are associated with some serious health issues, autoimmune conditions. There's a greater correlation between grain consumption or sugars and heart disease than actual saturated fat and cholesterol.
Yeah.
Because of its impact on triglyceride levels in the blood and all sorts of stuff. So,
sure.
I think sugar and grains are probably the two big ones that most people should avoid.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out with the gluten thing for a long time. So I would be gluten free, maybe 6 days a week, and then kind of kick my heels up on the 7th day, have a big beer and stuff like that. And so I'm interested to know from you, Yuri, what do you think about somebody who's 1 foot in, 1 foot out? Do you think that there's benefit to that at all, or do you think that somebody's really got to go 100%? I've been gluten free 100% for several months now, and I feel way better than I ever have before. So I do advocate that people try it out themselves, but I'm interested in your take about these small little exposures.
Yeah, for most stuff, I would say it's okay to do a little bit every now and then if you want to. But with gluten, it's really black or white, like it's all or none. And unfortunately, the reason for that is because gluten, it stimulates antibody production in your blood. So even if you have the smallest possible taste in some kind of sauce that contains gluten, it's going to trigger an immune response, and those antibodies have been shown to stick around in your blood for 4 to 6 months. So let's say you're going gluten free for an entire month, and then all of a sudden you say, you know what, I'm going to give myself a day off today, and you have a bagel or you have a bite of toast. You've now set yourself back for about 4 to 6 months. And obviously that's not the best news for that people
Right.
want to hear, but it's important to understand that that's what's happening. So it's really what I suggest people at least start doing is kind of starting with what you talked about, where it's kind of like 6 days or 5 days or whatever it is, and then allowing yourself to have a little treat every now and then, just so you can experience the difference. And then when you're ready to really take it to the next level and you've looked at some alternatives and some options other than bread or other than wheat, then you can say, you know what, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to make this part of my lifestyle. And I think it really becomes a decision of who you are in terms of a person and your identity as somebody who doesn't even consume it. It's not even an option, right?
Right.
So that's I guess that's the sad truth
That's
about
the good news and the bad news. The reason why my wife and I went 100% gluten and dairy free, other than butter, I love butter. It doesn't seem to bother me. Was our baby girl got eczema, and she was exclusively breastfed. But we noticed that when we went 100% gluten and dairy free, the eczema just started to disappear. And
Yeah.
so it's pretty much contained. It's about 90% contained to what it used to be. But she was born cesarean section, so she doesn't have the beneficial bacteria that are associated with natural childbirth and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of things there. So you mentioned gluten is one of those ones where we kind of have to kind of buy in and see if it really does help us or not. But you also mentioned that some things you can kind of kick your heels up with. So what about sugar? What about alcohol? What about all those fun things that we like to live with in life?
Yeah, I mean, my downfall is sugar, and I would clump in bread to that category as well, just because I was so conditioned to having it all the time.
Right.
So with sugar, the problem is that it's often associated with wheat. In the not all the time, but traditionally in baked goods, there's
Right.
always some kind of wheat in that. But the good news is that there's a ton of amazing recipes out there. If you just search online for gluten-free whatever, cupcakes, muffins, breads, cakes. There's a ton of amazing recipes based on almond flour, coconut flour, some really good things that you can enjoy. Sugar, again, it's one of those things where, arguably people say it's the worst ingredient or the worst nutrient, if you can call it that, with respect to our health. And for a couple reasons, because it obviously does that stuff to our blood sugar, because it increases the acidity in our blood, and that poses problems for potential cancer developments, stripping calcium from bones. So, I'm a realist as much as I'm an idealist. So I really espouse moderation, because I think if you do something where you're like, I hate this, I can't stand doing this, what's the point? Right? I mean, the best diet is the diet that you don't know you're on, right? So if you can do something where you enjoy it, and then you allow yourself a bit of flex to kind of nourish that inner child, whether that be through, some kind of treat, that's okay. I mean, I really do think it's okay, and there's better options than others, right? So if you wanted to have a cupcake, you could have a gluten-free cupcake, and honestly, if you use almond flour, the cupcake actually tastes 1,000 times better because it's a lot more moist. So it's just a matter of trying that stuff out and being exposed to it. So alcohol, not many redeeming qualities, but the reality is that, if we're going out and we want to celebrate stuff, or we're just having a nice glass of wine, again, there could be worse things. I mean, if you're doing that every single day on a very high volume and high frequency, that's a problem. But I think everything in moderation, so especially with wine, it's, the recommended is 1 glass per day in terms of cardiovascular health, but as soon as you have 2 glasses, it becomes a risk factor. So
There's a tipping point there somewhere.
yeah. So I think, you have to see I mean, over the holiday season and stuff, we tend to drink more, we tend to eat more, but I think that's part of life, right? We go through these ebbs and flows, or we like to enjoy ourselves, and I don't want to be the person to say you can't ever do that again.
Sure.
But I try to empower people with the knowledge so that they can make those decisions for themselves when they are willing and ready to do so, knowing the consequences and knowing other alternatives. So yeah.
That's good, Yuri. I'm happy that you said you like to empower people with knowledge. Obviously, a very intelligent guy. But no, we talking on this call, we can't go out there and make you put the fork down or bake you some gluten-free muffins. You guys got to do that for yourselves. And when Yuri said that they make some really good gluten-free snacks, he's telling the absolute truth. If you guys haven't opened up a gluten-free dessert cookbook and made something from there, it really tastes no different. And in fact, for me, the harder part about going gluten and dairy-free was not the gluten. You can make rice noodles and you can do all this different stuff, and it was the dairy, right? I can't have my precious Alfredo anymore. And so, and ice cream.
What? You can. We make a really good Alfredo sauce based out of cauliflower.
Oh, all right. I'll have to check that one out.
I'm telling you, if you have friends over for dinner and I'll have to send you the recipe.
Yeah.
It's trippy. They won't even know what's going on if you don't tell them. It's awesome.
You just saved my world, Yuri.
Yeah. There you go.
So let's empower people with this education that we were just talking about, all right? I want to dig into what the topic of this call is, which is cleansing the body, right? There's a lot of people talking about cleanses and detox diets and so on and so forth, and I've personally experimented a lot with this, and I've done some cleanses where at the end I felt amazing, my skin looked great, I had so much energy, fat was melting off my body, I didn't even notice, I didn't even want to lose any weight, and I was. And then I've done a detox where I felt like absolute shit for like a week straight, and I'm like, crapping my pants and things like that. So let's talk about kind of both of those, how you approach detoxing, because that's really where your line of expertise lies.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of them. Again, I got into cleansing because I needed to kind of heal my own issues. So it's funny because I have a real passion and background in high performance conditioning, and I was a strength conditioning coach at the University of Toronto for 7 years as well. And taking these principles over to a bunch of elite college athletes is very interesting. So it took a couple years for them to start to adopt some of it, but it was really cool. The reason I got into cleansing is because I didn't really find that there were many good options out there. It was like, okay, I can go pick up a detox kit and open up a package of pills and hope for the best, or I could do some kind of lemonade. Spicy lemonade cleanse where I do nothing but drink maple syrup and lemon water for 10 days and then purge everything out of my intestines with a saltwater flush, which is completely natural, right? And I'm looking at all these options and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then and as a rule of thumb, anything you see happening in Hollywood, you should probably avoid, right? Because they're doing extreme stuff where they're doing stuff over a weekend and it's obviously on the front page of whatever magazine. And people think that that's the way to do it, and unfortunately, it's not. So what I started to get into is looking, because really, when I went back to school and studied holistic nutrition, I just said, you know what? If I can just by cleaning up my diet, if I started to see all these amazing changes, well, that's pretty cool. And then I started to learn more about how the body works physiologically, and like our liver is our main detoxification organ. It requires specific nutrients at different phases of its detoxification process. So if you're doing something like the master cleanse or some kind of deprivational fast for an extended period of time, you're obviously going to lose weight. It's simple calories. You could do the Coca-Cola diet, you could do the orange juice diet, whatever it is you want. As long as you're consuming fewer calories, you will lose weight. But what are you doing to your health in the process?
Right.
So with those types of approaches, you're not giving your body, your liver, or the cells in the trillions of cells in your body the nutrients that they require to effectively detoxify, because they're doing that 24/7, and we don't even know, we're not aware of that. But they need specific nutrients, whether it be glutathione or vitamin C or specific sulfur-containing compounds that are prominently found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli or Brussels sprouts. If we're not giving our body those nutrients, well, where's it going to get them from, right? So as I started to look into the power of foods, I started to realize, like, well, why don't we just consider every meal as a potential way of cleansing or toxifying our body, right? So if you go to McDonald's, you're making one choice. If you have a salad, you make another choice. So I like to approach cleansing in the sense that it's not something you do for 10 days or 14 days or 30 days once a year or once in your life. Although, in a more focused manner, it definitely does help. But every time you take a bite of something, think about, is this cleansing me? Is this kind of a toxic, kind of junky type of food, or is this a food that's going to support my body's natural process of detoxification and health. And that's really the way that I like to get people to think about this stuff, because what you do on a daily basis is going to be far more important than what you do for a couple days once a year. We have a lot of stories of people that I've known who've done different things. I have a friend of mine who was a waiter at a breakfast restaurant, so she never really ate that well. And a couple years ago, she decided she wanted to do the Master Cleanse. So she had a lot of willpower going into it. So she did it for 10 days, lost about 20 pounds, and she felt awesome. But then on day 11, she was like, well, what do I eat now? And she ended up eating exactly the way she did before. And so within about a week, she regained all of that weight, and she was no further ahead than she was when she started. So my question is, why do that if you're not going to be doing things that are sustainable, if you're going to go back to square one? And a lot of research has shown that going up and down with your weights over and over again gives you, an increased chance of continuing to struggle with those weight issues. And also, one study showed you have a 30% increase in heart disease because of that. So that's not something I advise people to do. So I'm thinking, why, or how do we get people to think about just doing things sustainably, right? Do something every single day that can move you in the right direction. Right. And for me, that's the ultimate type of cleansing.
What is the top foods that you consider that people need to eat more of in order to cleanse their bodies?
Yeah, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, if you did nothing else but eat more greens or drink more greens, you would transform your life. This is kind of like my overriding message, I think, nutritionally. It's the power of greens are unbelievable. It's actually interesting because I was watching, I don't know if you saw the movie Gravity, but I was in the theater watching Planet Earth, and I'm like, wow, it's really interesting because all you see, like the two colors you see are blue and green, right? So water and plants. And I'm thinking that's very interesting because our body is about 65% water. And from my experience, we tend to thrive when we eat more plant-based foods. So I was like, yeah, we're kind of an interesting microcosm for all that. So I think eating green vegetables, whether it be broccoli, kale, Swiss chard, salads, any of that stuff is going to tremendously benefit your health. I really think you can take things to the next level when you start juicing. So the benefit of juicing is that it strips away the fiber, which is a bit of an issue if you're juicing the wrong things from a blood sugar perspective. But if you focus on vegetables, you're most likely fine. The benefit there is that because so many of us have a compromised digestive system, we don't absorb things properly.
Right.
Juicing allows you to get the essence of all of those nutrients very easily absorbed into your body. So I'm a huge fan of juicing, at the very minimum using some kind of like any kind of greens powder, making green smoothies. It's really tremendous. And the reason greens are so important, I don't want to get too technical here, is that they are the highest source of alkalinity. And basically what that means is that when you eat a food, it's either broken down into more of an acidic residue or an alkaline residue. And if we remember back to high school with the pH scale, 0 being very acidic, 14 being alkaline, our blood needs to be slightly alkaline, so just over 7, so which is the neutral point. When you eat a vegetable, for instance, it gives off more alkaline minerals, calcium, magnesium, potassium, than it does protein and phosphorus. So it's a very simple equation called PRAL. I'm going a little technical here, but I think it's important.
Dig deep. We've got some smart listeners.
Okay, so potential renal acid load. So PRAL is the short form. Essentially, it's very simple. If a food gives off more protein and phosphorus than it does those alkaline minerals that I just mentioned, it's an acidic food. So dairy, older cheeses like cheddar, those are the most acidic foods. And if you eat a lot of that stuff, then what that's going to do is it's going to shift the acidity level in your blood to being more acidic, and your body's very smart. It says, we need to bring this back to balance. So what does it do? It looks for buffers in our bloodstream, in our body. Calcium is a big buffer because it is an alkaline mineral. So what does it do? If it doesn't get enough calcium from the diet, it starts to leach it from the bones. So we've seen, as an example, that with osteoporosis and bone health, it's not about how much calcium or vitamin D you're taking, but it's about the pH level in your blood as being one of the most important determinants of your bone health. So greens are the most important component, I think, to our diets, because even if you're having meats and dairy and that other stuff, at the very minimum, balance it out by getting more vegetables in. Otherwise, you start to get into all sorts of issues, and it's not even just bone health. We're talking about like development of cancer, heart disease, all this stuff that creates inflammation in the body. A lot of that can be prevented or mitigated through eating more vegetables. So there we go.
Right. So I'm interested in a couple things on what you just said there. One
Yeah.
was butter. So we don't have any protein really in butter. So is that going to be more of an acid-based food or an alkaline-based food?
Yeah, it would definitely be more of an acid-based food. As a rule of thumb, pretty much anything that comes from an animal is going to be more acid-based. Pretty much all grains are acidic or slightly neutral or close to neutral. Most nuts and seeds kind of hover around neutral to slightly acidic. And then vegetables and fruit are on the alkaline side.
Right. Gotcha. So what about the blood sugar issues that can be associated with something like juicing? How do you handle that with people?
Yeah, so the big thing I tell people to steer away from is juicing fruit.
Okay.
So, if you go to a resort and they're like, oh, fresh pineapple juice, there's some benefits to pineapple, but realize that fruit has a lot of sugar in it. So if you don't have that fiber to kind of slow that sugar release out of your digestive system, that's going to cause some spikes in blood sugar. So when you're juicing, focus on vegetables because there's a very, very small amount of sugar in those. Really, you're not going to feel anything blood sugar wise. If you want to add a little bit of sweetness, you can throw in like one apple or 1 or 2 carrots to add a little bit more of a flavorful punch to it. And the key with greens is actually adding some lemon. So whether you're eating them steamed or cooked or juicing them, if you add a bit of citrus, so like lemon or lime into that, it really brings out those flavors and it makes them a lot less bland. But definitely avoid juicing fruits because when you look at, for instance, like an apple juice, a juice box. I refuse to give my kids apple juice because it's literally when I see it, I'm just giving them a can of Coke. The amount of sugar in the juice versus a can of Coke is almost identical.
Right.
So, even if you're juicing fresh apples, there's obviously benefit to having fresh apple juice, but just have the apple instead. You're much better off doing that as opposed to juicing 4 or 5 apples and then just chugging that because your liver is going to have to process a lot of the fructose. The glucose component of that's going to spike your blood sugar, and you don't want any of that stuff.
That's fantastic. So to sum up, would you say that your message, Yuri, is to eat more vegetables?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is really adopting more of a plant-based diet,
Sure.
more of a plant. So it's not about being vegan or raw or vegetarian. Sure. It's about just moving kind of along that scale to eating more plant-based foods. And that, like again, last night I had a steak, but we had broccoli, green beans, and a salad on the side. So for me, I don't eat meat all the time because I just don't resonate with it as well as some other people. But regardless of how you're eating, I do think that a paleo type of approach or more of a vegan type of approach is probably best for most people. But again, it's not about being dogmatic and saying you can never have meat or you can never have eggs or whatever. You really have to listen to your body, and whatever you're doing, just eating more vegetables and then obviously some non-sweet fruit like berries is a great way to do things.
Yeah. Before I ask you the last and final question, I was going to ask you about fruit because fruit is one of those kind of hairy topics, right? Where some people say, don't eat fruit, there's fructose, it can't be utilized by anything but the liver, blah, blah, blah. So obviously you can't just sit there and say fruit is an unhealthy food, right?
Yeah.
So what's your take on fruit for people maybe who want to lose weight and then just for average people?
Yeah, I think fruit is amazing. But I do think there's kind of a sliding scale of stuff we should focus on. So, I've done a lot of work in the raw food community, and I've kind of moved away from that because it's almost some of the arguments don't even make sense. People saying that we're only supposed to be fruitarians, we're only supposed to be eating fruit, and that's our native diet, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, what if you're from Scandinavia?
Yeah,
right?
the winter shows up.
Yeah, you're not going to be having many much fruit up there. Maybe if you live in Costa Rica, that's one thing, but I think that with respect to pretty much anyone, I think my recommendation is to focus on non-sweet fruit, and I think berries would be, for me, the top of the pinnacle of fruits. Very low glycemic index, loaded with antioxidants, and I really don't see any downside to berries. You could have buckets and buckets of it every day if you wanted to. Well, maybe not to that extent, but I don't think you can go that far wrong with berries. They're probably the best fruit, in my opinion. Apples and pears are non-sweets, so they're great. They do have a slightly higher amount of fructose compared to some other fruit. So you mentioned fructose being a bit of an issue for the liver, which is true, and that's one of the reasons we don't want to juice fruit excessively.
Right.
But I think berries, apples, pears are really, for me, the staple. And then we start getting into the tropical fruits, so mangoes, papayas, pineapple, bananas. I love papaya. I think it actually has a lot of healing benefits. So I would kind of remove papaya a little bit because it's not as sweet as mangoes and the other ones. But basically, any of those tropical fruit, especially if you live in a northern climate, I mean, it's not a native fruit. It's not seasonal for the most part. So I wouldn't go too crazy on that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, so if it's very, very sweet, just think about it on occasion. But as a staple, I would definitely steer towards the berries, apples, and pears.
Awesome, man. Well, you're about to run a cleanse for this new year, Yuri, and you have something to give away. And I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about what you're giving away right now.
Yeah, well, we're giving away quite a bit of stuff. So as you mentioned, my goal is to empower people with the right stuff to think about in terms of knowledge and tools and stuff. So we have an awesome program that we launch every January, which is our Total Wellness Cleanse. And right now we're launching a number of really cool training videos that can assist people with navigating through this whole, question about. It doesn't matter about, if you're thinking or not about doing a cleanse. That's the idea is that most of us are looking to feel more energetic, lose weight, improve our dietary habits, overcome cravings. So in these 3 training videos that we're giving out, we're basically going to show you exactly how to do that. We're going to show you some of the mistakes to avoid. We're going to show you exactly a number of the really, really good foods that you should incorporate into your diet, whether or not you ever want to do something more structured. And I'll also give you a free 1-day challenge that we're calling it. Basically, it's a kind of a free look at what you would eat in a typical day of cleansing. So we give you the recipes from morning till night, and it's kind of our way of showing you exactly how tasty cleansing can be if you do it properly. As kind of according to our philosophy. So that's we're giving all that stuff away, and we got a ton of awesome, really cool infographics and training tools and resources that go along with all that. So it's really about getting people on the healthy path for this year, and we're really excited about it.
That's awesome, Yuri. So you guys are crazy if you don't click the link below the video or below the podcast, because he's giving all that away for free. You don't have to do anything. Just click the link, check it out, and it's yours. So Yuri, I always ask people one more question. And that is, obviously, you're a successful guy. You've helped over 500,000 people already. You guys got to let that soak in for a second. You've got a great online business. You're very influential in the fitness industry as well. And I'm wondering, what's your secret to success?
My secret is my mindset, I think. I think, I was delusional, I think, as a soccer player, believing that I was the best goalkeeper in the world, like not even in just my town. And I was, maybe a little bit delusional, but I think having that type of mindset it can be very valuable if it's, within a healthy range, I guess. But I think with my business and what I've done, I have a very compelling desire. I feel like I'm being pulled towards this mission that we're on to helping a lot of people. So I always go back to that. I want to live a great life. I want to spend a lot of time with my kids. I'm very blessed to be able to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids every single day.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I really wanted to make part of my business right from the get-go. So I was very adamant about how to create a business that would support that. And just having that mindset of constantly envisioning what it is that we want to create, how do we want to help people. And so I would say mindset is probably mindset, and obviously taking action, because if you don't take action, none of it matters.
You don't get anywhere. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Yuri Elkaim, thank you so much for your time today and dropping your wisdom bombs on us, brother. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, buddy. It's been a pleasure.